Welcome to Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast with your host, Eric Wolf. In the next 30 minutes, we will help you to become a better industry professional with inspiration from some of the world's most successful people in our food and beverage tourism industry. With each episode, you will meet these leaders and examine their secrets of success. You will hear about the obstacles and challenges they have faced, along with their solutions and triumphs, and be inspired with ideas for many of the same business issues that you may be facing as well. And now for today's episode. Welcome, I'm Eric Wolf, and I'll be your host today for episode 45 of Eat Well, Travel Better, the Business of Food Travel podcast. And joining us today is Aashi Vale, co-founder of Traveling Spoon. Aashi Vale is the co-founder and co-CEO of Traveling Spoon, a company that is changing the future of travel by creating meaningful travel experiences. An industrial designer and patent holder with a deep passion for problem solving, Aashi has designed several award-winning consumer and medical products while working at design consulting firms for over a decade. She is a magna cum laude graduate of the Savannah College of Art and Design and received her MBA from the University of California, Berkeley. Aashi is also on the board of directors at the World Food Travel Association. Welcome, Aashi.
Hi, Eric. It's great to be here, being one of the people interviewed this time.
It's so strange because normally in the past 44 episodes, you've been my co-host, and this is going to become the Eric show. And I don't know. I don't know if I can do it without you, Aashi. I'm going to miss you.
Oh, I'm going to miss you too, but you're going to be amazing. I know it.
Well, I am really looking forward to seeing the next chapter of your life. But before we let you go, I would love to share with some of our listeners some of the secrets that you've learned in your career over time. So tell us about your eureka moment. How did you come up with the idea for Traveling Spoon?
I think maybe I will take you back a little bit just to give you a sense for my background and where I come from and how this eureka moment came along. I grew up in South India, in Chennai, and much to my parents' disappointment, they wanted me to pursue engineering or medicine or even business at the time. And I won a scholarship to study industrial design, which to me was the quintessential blend of art and science. But to them was like, what is this new thing that makes no sense whatsoever?
As parents do, they never understand what their kids do. Right? Yeah.
They still don't, I think. And so I studied at the Savannah College of Art and Design, graduated first in my class in industrial design, and then worked as an industrial designer for a decade on the East Coast, designing medical and consumer products. So everything from a liquid oxygen generator, for which I own a patent, to the very first hydroelectric shower light. And it was really exciting. I loved what I did. I worked with a fantastic team of people. We were really creating life-changing devices. But I will say, growing up, food has always been a passion of mine. I think it's because my parents are from different parts of the country. And so growing up and having dinners at home. So dinner was something we always ate together. And we would always have so many dishes at the table. And it was just one of my most favorite memories of home and family. And I also had this renewed love for food after I went to boarding school for a while and then came back home and was like, oh, this is what I've been missing. And so I've just always been passionate about food and travel and went to business school to start a company in the food space. And right before going to business school, so this was the spring of 2011, I was in Playa del Carmen in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And whenever I travel, I love to try the local and authentic food. Don't get me wrong, I love to eat at a lovely, fancy restaurant. But for me, it's really important to try the local food to really get a sense for, what's available and what's there. And the restaurants that I ate at that came highly recommended were beautiful restaurants, but the food itself seemed to cater to a Western palate. And I couldn't for the life of me find authentic Mexican food. I knew Mexico had phenomenal food, but I just couldn't find authentic food. The restaurants I ate at were, touristy and crowded. And I remember still this one day when I was walking to yet another restaurant and I was on the street and I happened to pass by this woman's home and I just looked through the window and I saw her cooking. And that for me was my eureka moment when I said, this is what I want. I want to eat with her. I want to hear her stories. And that's when the light bulb went off for me. A few months later, I met Steph Lawrence, my co-founder, while we were at business school, again over a barbecue or some other meal. And she and I just really bonded over our shared love for food and travel. And as we were talking, we realized that both of us really cared about exploring this space, to give people a chance to have really authentic food when they travel. On her bucket list of things to do when she was living in China was to learn how to make dumplings from a Chinese grandmother. And she couldn't find that. And so we still laugh about this now, but I said that I wanted to start Traveling Spoon because rather she said she wanted to learn how to cook with people in their homes, and I just wanted to eat in people's homes. So we decided to work on it together. And here we are. It's been a decade, and we have hosts in 200 cities and 65 countries around the world who are incredible cultural and culinary ambassadors of their region. So Traveling Spoon is this online marketplace that connects travelers with private and authentic food experiences, from homemade meals to cooking classes in people's homes around the world. And our goal really was to give people a connection to the local culture through food. For me, the power of travel, which is what we're doing at the World Food Travel Association, is that idea of gastrodiplomacy, right? It's to give people a chance to really understand each other so that we can realize at the end of the day that we're all humans, we all share the same values. And that's what travel does. It gives people a chance to realize. I've heard from so many of our guests who say, I've traveled to all these different places, and then you have a meal with someone. They could be culturally different or religiously different, but at the end of the day, you realize we're just, from a human values perspective, we're all the same. We love the same things. We care about the same things. And that's what I feel is missing now, is that sense that we are all the same. And we're just, everyone seems to be so polarized now, but food has that power to really bring people together. And that's what we try to do through Traveling Spoon. And we've got hosts everywhere, from Mongolia to Lebanon to South America. We started in Asia because that's where I'm from, and we knew back in the day that you could find a wine tour in France or a cooking class in Italy, but to go into a local's home in Vietnam or India and learn about their authentic food recipes that have been passed down through generations in their family was something you couldn't do. And that's the problem that we wanted to solve. We wanted to give people that chance to enter into a local's home and really find that connection. And so we started in India and then expanded to Thailand and Vietnam, and then really grew to have hosts in all parts of Asia. And then from there moved on to South America, Central America, Europe, and then North America.
Yeah, and you really solved that problem well. I mean, your company is, or was, I don't know what's happening with the pandemic now, but your company is one of the world's leading companies offering these types of training classes and really doing a great job. I mean, the reviews are fantastic, and you set out to solve a problem, and you did. So congratulations.
Thank you, Eric. The reviews are certainly the thing that brings us the most joy, is to hear from our guests, that actually both from our guests and our hosts, right? So we knew that we would be really bringing meaningful experiences to our guests because, again, you're connecting with people over food. But from a host perspective, it's been really refreshing to see how we've really been able to change some of our hosts' lives. So we always asked our hosts why they wanted to be Traveling Spoon hosts. And I've heard stories from so many different hosts around the world. So we have this one host, Iti, in Calcutta, and she used to work at British Airways, and then she retired. And for her, it would bug her that when people thought about Indian food, at least when Americans would come to India and to her home and thought about Indian food, they would expect your chicken tikka masala or your butter chicken or naan and your typical food that, what you associate with Indian food and Indian restaurants in the US. And that's because most of the restaurants in the US are Punjabi restaurants, right? And so kudos to them for starting to really liven up Punjabi cuisine in people's minds. But India has a variety of cuisines and micro cuisines. So within a certain state, you'll find tons of different types of micro cuisines. And Iti's goal was to really shine a light on Bengali cuisine, which is completely different from, cuisines in other parts of India. And so when they come to her home and have a meal, they're just so surprised by the variety, from spices to the types of food to the techniques by which they cooked. And so that for her brought her joy, and she wanted to really showcase Bengali cuisine, and that's why she became a host. We have a host in Tokyo who said she grew up in Tokyo with 3 siblings, and their whole life they never met a single foreigner growing up. And she now has 2 kids of her own, and she wants to expose her kids to children from around the world and be exposed to new cultures. In Thailand and Vietnam, I know our hosts who love using this as a way to practice their English speaking skills. And what's brought us great joy is that we've been able to make these hosts micro entrepreneurs, making money doing what they love. I remember this one back in, like, now what, 8 or 9 years ago, when I was in Varanasi in India. I was introduced to this one family. And so we vet every single host that we bring on. We go into their homes, we taste the food. So these are high quality culinary experiences that have been curated by us. And it was this older man in his 60s with his wife, and she had been cooking for his family, her in-laws, his parents, her friends, for their whole life, and raised their kids, and is a wonderful cook. And now he was championing her, right? The 60-year-old traditional Indian man was like, now is my wife's time to shine. She's a phenomenal cook, and I want her to make money and show off her cooking skills. And I still remember just what a warm feeling that brought me. It's just so wonderful to see that even in your 60s and 70s, you can find something that truly brings you joy, and you can make an income from it. So it's just been really wonderful to be able to offer that to people.
I love how you've really shown both sides of the coin here. So obviously you're touching the lives of travelers. You talked about gastrodiplomacy, getting to know people through food, through learning their family recipes and so on. And I think that's probably what always connected you and me. We have that same view of culinary culture. I'm the same. I'm just like you, right? Don't take me to the Michelin restaurants. It's money wasted. Take me to the street food vendor, and whose language we don't speak, and we're going to struggle through that. But that's the kind of fun I love. But then you've also shown the other side of this is the hosts themselves, the entrepreneurs, and the things they've done, the lessons they've learned, how they've grown both professionally and personally. And I don't think that when people talk about companies, it's either, you sell a product, you make money, and that's it, right? But you've actually shown 2 different human sides of running a business. That's I don't think I've ever seen that in anyone I've talked to before. That's very interesting.
Oh, thanks, Eric. We've been really lucky to pursue what we're passionate about and to be able to have a meaningful impact on people.
Yeah.
Right? It's certainly fortunate.
So now I was in a normal time, I would ask you about what challenges you've seen in your career, and I could probably answer that for you. It's the same one that everyone has been faced with now. It's got to be the pandemic, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's been a tougher time that we've had. Certainly lots of tough times. There's ups and downs in starting and running a company. But when your company is about travel and travel comes to a complete halt, that can be tough. So yeah, I remember April of last year when pretty much revenue was 0 because all of our bookings had been canceled, and there was just, nothing. There were no bookings coming through, and cancellations were building up, and it was scary. And it was really scary. We didn't know how long it was going to, go on for.
Yeah.
And so we quickly did, 2 things that were really important to us. One was, as I mentioned before, many of our hosts were dependent on Traveling Spoon for their income, and we just felt really responsible for them and their lack and the lack of travel and how it was going to affect them. And so we started this emergency host fund to request donations from people and to send that to our hosts who are most at risk. And we were so grateful. We had money come in from the entire team, all of us, but also our investors, the guests, other hosts who were in better condition, who were just so magnanimous and generous and kind. And so we were able to send these donations out through a grant to to our hosts who are most at risk. And, our hosts, especially in Asia, a little money goes a long way. And so for some of them, this was, 6 months of savings that they could live off of. And then the second thing we did rather quickly was to pivot to offering online cooking classes. Initially, we did this just as a way to keep our hosts really engaged, because I remember talking to one of my hosts and she was like, Aashi, I love my husband, but he cannot be the only person I speak with every day. She's like, I really need to have, outside connection. And so I would love to, to showcase my food and be able to do this in a virtual way. So within 4 weeks of the pandemic hitting, we had 25 online classes that we started. And then within 7 weeks, we had 100 plus online cooking classes. So these are private online cooking classes that we offer our guests. And you can learn anything from, noodle soup in Ulaanbaatar to meze in Beirut, to dosas in a kitchen with one of our hosts in South India. And what it did was it was refreshing to me. I didn't realize that it would have such an impact, but so many people would say this was the highlight of their quarantine, because even though they weren't there in person, they were actually still able to connect with these hosts from a different part of the world. And they felt like they could escape from their kitchens and travel without having to get on a plane. And so in some ways, it really democratized food travel, right? For a $40 experience, you can meet with a local in Addis Ababa and learn to make injera with them and foster that connection. And so many of our hosts were like, wow, I really want to go there now, and I will meet Daniel in Addis Ababa in person the next time I go. So it actually just strengthened that connection between cultures and between countries. And it's such a great way now. We weren't able to do that before, right? I couldn't find an online class where I could learn to cook, I don't know, lap gai in like northern Thailand, but now I can. And so it's just, the silver lining there is that it allowed us to expedite the process to really connect people to food and recipes around the world, and do it in a virtual way that's affordable to many. So that became our lifeline through this entire pandemic. And we have seen travel pick up, over the past 6 to 8 months, especially in the summer. It was good in some countries, but it's still, I think it's here to stay. We've still got a ton of bookings for online classes. And what we also did actually was offer corporate online cooking classes. So this is like a team building event where 25, 50, 100 people in a team will learn to make the same dish and talk about it. So that part has done really well as well.
That's an amazing story. It's so moving. And you used a very strange expression. You said the highlight of my quarantine. And I thought, can you imagine, in 5 years, we're going to be talking, what was the highlight of your quarantine experience? What a strange thing to talk about, did you ever think, did the young Aashi ever think that she would be saying something like that later in her life?
No, the idea that you couldn't meet people and that you couldn't leave your home unless it was for essential things is so foreign, right? Like, who would have ever thought about that? It's just a different world, and it's going to be different. I don't know how long it's going to take before we can return to some semblance of normalcy, whatever, it's going to be a new normal for sure.
Well, speaking of a younger Aashi, if you could give some advice to a younger version of yourself, what would that be?
When we're young, Eric, I feel like we're just so worried about what other people think, and how you're perceived. And I think when I was younger, I didn't speak up as much as I should have. There were things I thought about and things I was passionate about, but I really didn't say it out loud, or I was just, a little shyer or meeker. And that's definitely something I would tell myself now, is that you think people care so much about you, but really people have lots of things going on in their lives. And you are not, the biggest concern. So like, if you really want to share something, share it. Like, be unafraid to speak up, and you learn so much from it. And actually, you had mentioned, talking about, I wanted this to be something I could share with entrepreneurs around the world, especially in the food space, and some of the advice, and this sort of segues into that, which was really when I grew up in India, and people would say, oh, when you have an idea, hold it close to your heart, and especially with a new company, because you don't know who might take it and run with it. But what I learned while I was in business school at Berkeley was that really, if you have an idea, share it, because the value that you get from people giving you feedback, people connecting you to others in the space, is far outweighs the risks that someone would take your idea and run with it. And ideas are a dime a dozen, but it's how you execute on them that really makes a difference. And so, especially when you're within a trusted community, share your idea, get people's thoughts on what it could be. When we started Traveling Spoon, we told pretty much everyone at school about it. And we had so many people who were people we did surveys on, we got research from, professors who connected us to investors, and there were people who also said, oh my God, I would never do this, like eat in someone's house, why would I do that? And that was important for us to hear, that was, a barrier we would need to overcome. And so one such, person was like, no, I wouldn't go into someone's house and eat. And then I said, okay, what about if we showed you pictures about this person and like really introduced you to who they were? And I remember this one woman was like, oh, that's what the food looks like, and those are her kids, and yeah, absolutely.
Wow, they're humans too.
Yeah.
Imagine.
I mean, we're talking 10 years ago now, right?
Yeah.
Where this idea was so new to people. But honestly, if we didn't share that idea, we really would not have gotten as far as we did. And that's definitely one of the pieces of advice I would give to young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs everywhere is share your idea. And it also makes you accountable. As soon as you tell someone this is what you want to do, and then you're sort of beholden to it, and then the next time you meet them, they're like, oh, where are you at with that? And so it makes you more accountable
for it. Yes,
exactly. And it's just when you share your passion, and when people really feel that, they want to help. Humans are such helpful people, and that it's what makes us who we are. We're a species with extraordinary skills, and it brings us pleasure to help other people. And so when you share your idea, people are there to help out if they can. And so that's definitely something I would stress.
Sharing an idea is like sharing food. I mean, we were talking about gastrodiplomacy before, and there's a young woman, Katiana Lejeune, who we interviewed in an earlier version of our podcast, and she tells stories about world leaders coming together, and there was someone from, I think it was Belarus, and someone from Ukraine, and they were at odds with each other, but then they had a bread product that was very similar in each country, and the two guys, of course, older white men, right? Butting heads, but then they came together and they broke down the barriers over bread because they had similar recipes.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I was just a joy speaking with her. And that's exactly what, food does. It really gets people to break down their barriers and sort of just relax and chat and talk. And that's what's so important.
Yeah.
We should do that with Greeks and Turks. It would be a really fun exercise.
Well, I don't know. I was in Turkey in June, and the way they described it was, we're kind of like two sides of the same coin, and the people actually don't really hate each other, but we like fighting over things like food, like who owns the yogurt, right? Or who owns baklava? Owns,
exactly.
Is it Turkish coffee or is it Greek coffee, right? But they actually pointed this out. They said it's more the leaders. It's like boys fighting over toys, and the leaders fighting over this and that, and the people don't care. People just want to get along. I've always thought that maybe it's just the world leaders that they're the troublemakers, right? We're humans just want to get along and eat together and have fun.
Absolutely, leaders need to set that example.
Yeah. I've always said we should put the world's leaders in a hotel banquet room and ply them with plenty of food and alcohol, and come out a week later, they'd all be dead or we'd have world peace.
Oh, I agree. I love that idea. Let's do it.
So what other advice do you have for entrepreneurs in our industry? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I'd say another thing is to always surround yourself with people who inspire you and are experts in their field. So starting the company, there was certainly things, Steph and I had our skills for sure, but there are certain things that we weren't very good at and didn't know how to do.
Mhm.
And we really sought out people that we admired in their fields, whether it was technology or, PR, things like that. And the piece of advice I would give people is, and you're trying to get advisors, don't straight up go and ask someone to be your advisor, because people usually think it's a huge commitment and that they don't have as much time as they would want to put towards it. But instead what we did was we sought out people we truly respected in different fields, and we'd reach out to them and say, would you happen to give us 20 minutes to just share our idea, and we have a few questions really specific related to the field you're in. And most of the time people would say, yes, absolutely, I'm happy to help if it's 20 minutes. And so we would get their advice and then actually work on it, take it to heart, implement some of the ideas, and then share that information back with them and say, this is what I did, this is what happened, this is how we're going to move forward. And then kept that communication open. So every month or so we'd send an email saying this is where we're at. And then a few months later we'd say, okay, would you mind, I have a few more questions, you have 20 minutes again to chat. And then we would speak again. Now, by the time we did this 3 or 4 times, I knew we had a pitch at a conference coming up. And so we needed, to show that we had advisors. And so we simply asked, the person, I remember our advisor at Lyft at that point, and I said, would you mind, being listed as an advisor for our presentation? They're like, oh yeah, absolutely, not a problem. So now at this point, they're already invested in you. They've given you their advice. And just being an advisor, they've already done, most of the work. And so at that point, there's no friction.
Yeah.
But if you straight up went up and said, hey, would you be an advisor? One, you don't know how valuable they might be unless you work with someone, your communication, your styles of working together, the advice they offer and how relevant it is, you don't know. And then 2, it's just something that people say, I don't have the time for. But if you do it slowly and really communicate with people and build that trust over time, they are more likely to become your advisor. So that's sort of my second big piece of advice that we learned over time, is to, surround yourself with good people and communicate with them first before asking them to be an advisor.
Because there are a lot of young people looking for mentors, and you're right. It's almost like they go out to collect you, like, oh, I've got Aashi, she's an advisor, check, right? And then and never come back again to for anything. But I like your method because you're showing the proof. You're showing that they're listening, right? They're proving to you that they're listening, they're taking to heart what you're saying, and maybe they give you some other feedback, right? Or maybe they don't agree with you 100%. You're having a dialogue at least, and having that interactivity, which, and you, like you said, you don't know if they're going to be good advisors. So it kind of goes both ways, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then the other thing that came to mind is, if they aren't the right person or they don't have the time, you can always ask them to say, hey, is there somebody you would recommend that I speak with? Just like one person. And, usually people feel badly about saying no to something. So they want to help in any other way they can. And so they're more likely to connect you with somebody else who, could be great. And that's how you build your network and how you, build trust.
How do you say to someone, well, you're a dad, you're not going to be a good advisor. Could you recommend
No, Eric, this is if they say no to you first.
No. Well, so you're moving into a new chapter of your life. What legacy do you hope to leave behind if we fast forwarded, 40 or 50 years from now, and Aashi is an old lady, you're a grandmother, and you've got all these little grandkids running around. What legacy do you hope to leave behind?
Oh, I just really wish that food continues to be the way that we become a world that is at peace and that we're more communicative. And I want for more people to open up their homes to others and to open up their food stories and their kitchens, right? And to really showcase all of these wonderful local cooks around the world and the stories that they're wanting to share and that they have to share. The pandemic has certainly made things different, where sadly we're almost scared of meeting people, especially strangers. And I hope that one day soon that changes, that we can feel comfortable with strangers, because then they're not strangers, they're fellow humans. And that's what I would love to leave behind, is that sense that food can bring us closer and that we continue to become closer as a species. And
Well,
maybe with other species too.
well, it's important to note here that your company, Traveling Spoon, has been an enormous influence on breaking down these barriers around the world, and people have been able to experience that gastrodiplomacy, even if they don't call it that, even if they don't know what's happening, but they're still learning and they're still growing because of the impact of your efforts, and really, you've taken these values to heart, and it comes out in everything you do. So yeah,
Thanks,
I
Eric.
support your legacy. I'd like to see that too. So
Thank you. I mean, I think that's exactly what we're also trying to do at the WFTA, and I hope that just continues on forever because it's such a wonderful thing and a meaningful thing for people to have, no matter what.
yes, I agree. Well, that's why we're doing this. Aashi, I'm going to miss you. You are such a beacon of bright light and joy in everything that we do here at the association. You're wise, you're kind, you're
No,
smart.
Eric.
It's we're going to miss you. You've left an indelible mark here in a good way on the association and the podcast, and it's just been a real pleasure. I've learned things from you, and it's going to be a different world going forward. But
Oh,
thank you
Eric,
for
it has
everything you've
been.
done.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity. It has been such a delight and pleasure to meet so many people and to hear their stories and share them. And it's been just wonderful working with you. And I'm still around. We're going to be connected no matter what.
I hope so. I hope so.
Just not on the podcast as often, but maybe, once every once in a while, I would love to still be
Plan
there.
a meal together.
Yeah,
Plan a meal together.
exactly. I still owe you a dinner at home, and the same here. One day when I'm in Spain, I will come knocking.
That would be nice. And you've also inspired me. I would really like to meet, what's her name, Izzy in Calcutta?
Yes, Iti.
I would love to meet her because she sounds like a really inspirational, powerful personality.
She is a strong, delightful, wonderful woman,
Lovely.
and I love what she's doing.
Lovely.
Yeah. So yeah, for sure. Let us
Well,
know. We can connect you.
So Aashi, the podcast is not going to be the same without you, but you're still going to be there. You're still going to be at Traveling Spoon. I've got your email. I've got your Gmail. I'm ready to track you down whenever I need to. But you've left a very positive, indelible mark on the podcast, and also the other work that you've done here at the association. It's just been a true joy to work with you, and so thank you for everything.
Thank you, Eric. I'm so excited to continue to really make powerful the meaning that food travel can have. So thank you so much for your support.
It's been a sheer pleasure. Thank you, Aashi.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening today. The Eat Well, Travel Better podcast is brought to you by the World Food Travel Association, the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. Our mission is to preserve and promote culinary cultures through hospitality and tourism. By doing so, we empower local communities and entrepreneurs with the knowledge and tools needed to reach new food lovers and gain a competitive edge. Founded in 2003, now we shepherd an annual community of 200,000 professionals in more than 150 countries. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and you can learn more about us, subscribe to our newsletter, and join our family at worldfoodtravel.org. Until next time, eat well and travel better.